air principle. Okay? So, let's move on to an allegory of Freemasonry. Right? So we looked at the compasses and square and the light and the G. All right? We'll go back to the sun as a symbol of Freemasonry. This is depicted in image 4 and 5. As I said, that's what the higher aspects of consciousness are symbolized by the sun. Okay, the light, shedding light on knowledge. I want to talk briefly about the word Mason. All right, so let's look at image number 6, which has a whole lot to it. All right, image number 6. There's so much symbolism in it. It's a very complex image. Okay, to break down in its fullness. But let's start with that. The word Mason, okay, means builder. And that's all it means. It means builder. If you're a Mason, you're a builder. And what I've said in my work is that everyone is a Mason. Whether they, identify with the occultic or esoteric aspects of Freemasonry or not, it matters not. Everyone on this planet is a builder of our collective experience through what they think, what they feel, and what they do. The 3 aspects of consciousness that are used to create what we get here. Therefore, everyone is a Mason. Everyone is a builder. And that will be unpopular. Saying that everyone is a Mason. I didn't say everyone is a lodge Freemason. I said everyone is a builder of their experience. Understand the difference. Therefore, we are all ultimately Masons or builders of what we get. Okay? That's what this word ultimately means. Now, here above this, in this image, you see, to all free and accepted. Okay? This is the distinguishment between 2 general types of Freemasons. Okay? There's something called operative Masonry. Operative Masonry, it stems from the builder guilds of the ancient world. Okay? And going back into the Middle Ages and the building of the cathedrals, and we can get into all of those origins, okay, and, perhaps we will. But essentially, some of the lodge aspects of Freemasonry come down to us in the modern world from some of these building guilds from the ancient past. And it goes right back into the times of, the building of all of the ancient sites, like the pyramids and the ancient temples, all of the wonders of the world, and ancient stone building techniques that have been lost to modern history. Okay? They go right into the dawn of antiquity and the dawn of mankind. All right? But more in the modern world, the lodge system takes some of its rituals and some of its symbols from the builders' guilds around the time of the 1st century AD into and upward into including the Middle Ages and the times of the buildings of the great Gothic cathedrals. These builders' guilds contained masons or very skillful stoneworkers that had the teachings, held the teachings of how some of these construction techniques were used to build these incredible monuments, okay? And they often would unite with each other because their craft, their art form, was very valuable to people. Kings and emperors and the church would very much seek out these building techniques when they wanted a huge structure completed or built, okay? And therefore it was a lucrative business. And you had side benefits. Even though there were despotic rulers in areas all over the world that would control through violence the movement of their people, what they were allowed to have, what they were allowed to do, what they were allowed to say, what they were allowed to read or even think, okay? These masons or builders were granted a modicum of freedom, okay, a level of freedom that wasn't afforded to other people, so that they could move around on the earth in ways that other people couldn't. They were allowed to travel to certain places without their movement being restricted. They were allowed to have certain educational materials that were off access to other people because of these psychopathic rulers. Okay? So, not only that, but again, since their skills were in such demand, they were well paid. So they became knowledgeable, they gained knowledge of other cultures and areas of the world, and they became wealthy. And this is the origins of the lodge system, again, which I don't want to focus on very much, but just to give a brief background of, and you can read that extensively through any, Google search or checking out some books on Freemasonry itself. So this form that represents free, okay, is operative Freemasonry, or a true Mason, a true builder, or what could be said is an esoteric Mason. Okay, somebody that truly has the keys of the craft or of this esoteric tradition in their hands, in their minds, and in their hearts. That's a true free Mason. An accepted Mason is known as a speculative Mason. Okay? And this term was used for people outside of the craft that were taken into its knowledge, that were showing that they indeed wanted the knowledge that was held by the original esoteric teachings of Freemasonry. And again, as I said, this goes back to ancient Egypt and even before. All right? So much of the Masonic tradition has Egyptian symbolism within it. All right? Because the land known as Kem, which is where the Cometian mysteries came out of, this was an initiatory mystery tradition that came out of this region of the world and eventually became Freemasonry. It's one of its forms. Kabbalah is another one of its forms. And again, it's basically the same teachings. All right? And we'll see it shares some of its same symbolism. So, accepted Masonry is also known as speculative Masonry. Okay? People who are originally outside of this tradition of teachings that are accepted into them. All right? And this is kind of where the lodge system, in its knowledge, I believe, begins to become degraded. Not that you don't want to share these teachings, but when they did this in the lodge system, at least, it really began to open up into the knowledge of Freemasonry into people who may not have had other people's best interests at heart, people who may not really have taken these teachings as anything that are truly fundamental to human freedom, because they don't really care about human freedom, okay? And began to pervert them for their own selfish aims because they could see the potential that a system based in hierarchy, compartmentalization, and a certain degree of secrecy would afford them. Okay? And these are the dangers of that structure. I'm certainly a proponent that modern-day Freemasonry needs to be restructured. And many people have said this in the past. I mean, I believe it was the Duke of Kent back in the 1700s who said Freemasonry has already been so infiltrated by dark solar cult worshippers, dark occultists in other words, that he felt it should have been disbanded altogether, the lodge system. And indeed, it has been infiltrated. And, I think I'm making this abundantly clear to people that the modern system is infiltrated by these darker elements. I'm not picking up for the modern lodge system. I'm telling you, it's infiltrated and it's watered down. This is why I'm trying to teach the original essence of this tradition to the best of my capability. And again, I can't teach every aspect of it. I could put a lot of things out there for people to look into, and I'm going to. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this, okay? However, the only real teacher is your own desire to do your own research. That's the real teacher. I'm not the real teacher, okay? I could be somewhat of a way shower for people to open the door and say, here, you want to walk through this door? Well, there it is. And connect some dots and, bring some information together for people. And that's all I do. That's it. You need to integrate this into yourself through your own desire to do so in the spirit of truth. That's it. And I think I've said that to a point of almost boredom in the past. But, people need to hear things a lot of times, apparently, because I still get people that listen to a little clip of one show or something, and then, suddenly, as Bob Tuskin is fond of saying, everybody's an operative, Then I become somebody that's trying to pick up for people who are doing evil in the world, or saying that, I guess being an apologist, I guess. And that's not what I'm doing here. I'm trying to paint the bigger picture of what has gone on with this tradition, and then encourage people to look into it for themselves to see what teachings they can pull out of it. All right? So, continuing. So you have operative and speculative forms of Masonry. The speculative form, however, ultimately deals with the allegorical aspects and the symbolic aspects. So we're not to say that this is a lesser form of Freemasonry. It's just the words free and accepted. Free alludes to the original operative Masons who basically became rich, powerful, etc. Okay, in the past, created the modern lodge system and then took other people into it from outside of it, or accepted Masons. But speculative Masonry is ultimately what we're teaching here. Okay. The word operative means you have to put it into operation in the world. It has to become integrated with your behavior, with your actions. Okay? So, both of these forms of Freemasonry are important. I'm just trying to get you to understand what these words refer to on this image. So that's to all free and accepted Masons, okay? We see the compasses in square with the G. We've already looked at that, okay? And then we have the two pillars, okay, with the third symbolic form of the pillar being represented by this gentleman in the middle riding on a goat, okay, who we'll get to in a moment. Actually, we'll probably get to that in the second hour of the show when we hook up with Oracle Broadcasting. But we have these two pillars, okay. One is called the Terrestrial Pillar, and one is called the Celestial Pillar, okay. So we have these depicted, and we have the symbols of the sun and the moon above them, and the all-seeing eye. And we saw that previously when we looked into the religious traditions, into the solar cult, the lunar cult, and then the cult of the stars and planets represented by the all-seeing eye. And we're going to see this again when we look at the first-degree tracing board. Okay? So, again, these pillars represent different aspects of consciousness, the actions and the emotions. The solar pillar is the actions, the lunar pillar is the emotional qualities. They need to be brought into synthesis with each other, or unity, such that we are doing that which we think and feel is right. And those things are not in opposition with each other. The middle pillar is represented by this gentleman in the middle there, blindfolded, dressed in white, riding on a goat. His name, Hiram Abiff. Hiram Abiff. A-B-I-F-F. Hiram Abiff is allegorically, okay, the prototypical Freemason. Okay, he is the builder of the Temple of Solomon. One of the three builders, I should say. Okay, as we saw before, briefly, the Temple of Solomon represents the self. It represents the three aspects of consciousness. It represents thought, emotion, and action, and it represents the body, mind, spirit connection. It also represents the brain, Okay, the lower aspects of the brain represented